Educating, informing, serving. Fact TV, keeping government honest.
I'm going to call the meeting of the Saxtons River Village Trustees to order. Rick Holloway and I are here at Main Street Arts with a number of people. And I'm passing around a list to get the names of those people. Would everyone else, and I probably will repeat this during the meeting, would everyone else please put your name and a brief physical address into the chat so we have it for Carl Ball's minutes? So if you could just put, you know, Rockingham Hill Road and your name or something like that. I don't need the trustees because they're all identified. This is a hybrid meeting. The agenda has two numbers you can text or call if you find yourself in difficulty. Please try to get my attention if I seem to be missing you, and I ask the other trustees to help me with that also. Having people in the room as well as people on Zoom makes it a little more challenging for me, you know, retired. Okay, so the meeting has been called to order and we'll begin with any public comments. Are there any public comments within the room first? No? And on Zoom? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move to the proposed water study with MSK Engineering. Patrick Smart is here on Zoom from MSK Engineering. And Patrick, I had the impression that Scott was coming. Is that your impression also, Scott Pickup, the town manager?
That was my impression as well, yes.
Gary, you work in that building sometimes. Can you give us any information about that?
Yeah, Scott did say he was going to be on. Let me just go see if he's in his office. Hang on a second.
Okay. So for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Vernon Academy had begun discussions with the town of Rockingham. We are in an unprecedented time.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. For water infrastructure. There's federal funding coming through the state, and it's a good time to be looking at these things. So at the last meeting, Scott Pickup came with a proposal, and the plan is to discuss it further tonight. I would love for him to give a brief précis, but I don't see him. Carl, would you want to take that on?
A brief précis of
The water proposal?
I can, hang on a second, let me call it up.
You know what? Scott is here, as if I have summoned him up.
Okay, I'll leave it there.
So Scott, I've just given a tiny bit of background, and I wonder if you would be willing to talk about the proposal that you and MSK Engineering, and to some extent Carl and I, have been working on.
Okay, great. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure I'm off of mute, so everybody's got it. Good.
I'm hearing
okay.
you clearly here. Can you hear in the room?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. So thank you. So this is sort of an initial walkthrough of a project that we started talking about really over the summer, and it really involved a host of people. We went and met with some folks at the academy. We went with some of our water department people, looking at some of the facilities and some of the issues. And the questions that were raised were concerns about supply, firefighting supply if there was ever an issue, And then there was some just long-term investment concerns about the state of the current system that's serving the academy, and also the state of the system that's coming from the other part of town that I guess was part of the old Kern-Hatton system way back in the day. So in order to get a better sense of all of those pieces, we asked the engineers to come and to give us their best guess as to, what is our current conditions, what are our alternatives, and then with all of this money now coming from the federal government about infrastructure, are there ways that we can position ourselves to potentially be able to pursue some of these grants and look at opportunities to invest in that infrastructure. So at this point, that was the scope of what we asked MSK to look at. They have come up with a fairly comprehensive proposal. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to be a decision in terms of how does the village want to position itself going forward with looking at, that major capital infrastructure, and how do you want to invest in it, and where do you see it as you position yourselves going forward. So those are really the main items that were in that proposal. It's come to this point. I know that we've talked with various members at previous meetings, and I know some of the board members have actually been out on some of the site visits. So there's a lot of specific detail that they're probably more comfortable or familiar with than I am. But that's really where it brought us till today. And the goal is, if you do undertake that study, there'll be alternatives and opportunities and chances to then participate in upgrades and potentially looking at ways to make a 50 or 75-year investment in that major system, which is serving portions of your downtown, portions of your firefighting, and also the academy. So that's sort of the 10,000-foot view of where we are. Sort of brings us to tonight. So that's, at this point, I think with timing and some of the programs that are coming, with some of the monies that are coming, the question that you have to start to consider is, how do you want to position yourselves to participate in that going forward? So this is really the first step in that longer process.
Thank you, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess initially, do we want to go for public comments? And then trustees. Okay, I'm seeing Carl's hand, so we'll go right to Carl.
So, Scott, I have, as a practical question, are you looking at this agreement being an agreement between the village and MSK, or the town and MSK? Who are going to be the signatories?
Well, I would assume, again, depending upon where your funding is coming from, right now it would be between the village, because you would ultimately be the people that were paying the bills. So at that point, I would assume that that would be the agreement. We would certainly participate in helping to make sure that the agreement was completed, and the information, we work with the engineers to make sure they got all the information that they needed to complete the scope. But right now, Carl, I would assume that this would be between the village and MSK.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that.
Yep.
Anybody here? Ellen. So this is Ellen Howard speaking from here.
I just have some concerns that the village residents have recently taken a large hit with their sewer rates. And we also face the need for a fire station, which is going to be another, fairly expensive project. And I just really think there needs to be a strong look as to see whether, Vernon Academy has needs, which I know are there. But the other side is, does the village itself need a potable water system versus having a firefighting system? And I think we really have to look to see whether there's a need in the village for a potable water system. Because there's certainly going to be a big difference in cost to create, to maintain, you know, a potable system versus a fire system. And the other question is simply, are we looking at what's going to be a municipally owned system and a municipally run system and maintained, which again creates additional costs down the road. Because you've got it's going to be a municipal system. Are you looking at owning the land and owning the well and all the land around it that protects us, the water mains, and then you've got the cost for the homeowners if you go with this of putting in, you know, usually you have to put your line from the public line into the lot, which is expensive. I mean, we already done that for the sewer lines, and we had to pay for all, you know, the homeowners had to pay for that. Then the other question I was wondering is, are you going to be looking at a meter system so that you're not paying just based on some formula, but you're paying on a meter, so you're paying for actual use of the water, because that's the only way you're going to have conservation of water. If you don't have it metered, then people aren't going to worry about how much they use. And you've got a good share of the village that's on shared water systems that are working well. And they don't, you know, they're not costing an arm and a leg to run. For example, the Clarkport West system, you know, the household pays $150 a year, and that includes putting aside funds for maintenance of the system. It's not just paying our basic costs, we're including maintenance costs in that $150. So I think I have some real concerns about what would happen, you know, down the road, to cost and everything. And I think the other thing is to look at the fire protection system. Are there other alternatives? Are there alternatives to having a hydrant system? I mean, by creating more accessibility to ponds. We've got the rec area. There's a pond down on Westminster West Road. You know, there are some other locations. Putting in a dry hydrant down on River Street, because I don't believe the platform down there has a dry hydrant. So those are some things that I think need to be also considered before we just come up with a big, huge plan. There are a lot of little things that need to be looked at. And the other thing I just question is how bad are the systems? I went on the annual reports, the state annual reports for problems with public water systems. And I only found one violation for Vernon Academy, and I didn't find any for the Warner Center. And this goes back, I went back to 2014, looking at those reports. So I just think there's a lot of things to look at, and I don't think we just should be looking at just putting in a public water system.
Okay. I want to make sure that everybody on Zoom was able to hear Ellen. I'm sorry, Ellen, but you are a first test case. We don't have a central mic that we handed you. Were you able to hear, Scott?
Yeah, actually we were. I was, and a lot of what Ellen's concerns are, I think, comes out of that preliminary engineering report. It does look at life cycle costs. It looks at capital costs. It looks at alternatives. It doesn't designate anything in specifics as it lays out all your alternatives. I don't know enough about what other problems that you've had. There were some references to some previous problems with coliform bacteria in the spring and summer of 2020. Patrick's on the line. Maybe he could maybe update us as to what those were, because I'm not aware of those specifics. But I think that, you know, there are certainly questions or concerns. And again, one of the alternatives you can always default to is to do nothing. And when you do that, then that opens up, you know, future issues if that's in fact what you choose to do. So, you know, that's one of the concerns. I think when you do a study that looks at all of these alternatives, I think it gives you detailed information and answers some of those questions that are legitimate. I'm not trying to downplay those. I think they're all very important and need to be analyzed and reported. But I think that's part of what, that's specific within this document. If you look at page 3, section 5, preliminary engineering, it does list a lot of those issues as part of the actual report.
Okay. Let me just, before I give you an opportunity to respond, Patrick, I want to make sure there are other responses to what Ellen had to say and Scott's follow-up.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure, Ellen,
As
go
I
ahead.
remember, the draft that I saw for the proposal did not include as one of the alternatives, just looking at the need for a fire protection system.
Mhm.
That is something that was not into the alternatives to be looked at. And to me, that should be one of them, is maybe we just need a fire protection system and not a whole potable water system.
Mhm.
And that should be considered.
So there's a solid suggestion to add to the list of alternatives explored in the proposal, constructing a firefighting system for the village of Saxtons River. Patrick, do you want to respond?
Hi, Amy. Can you hear me okay?
I can. So this is Patrick Smart, Pat Smart of MSK Engineering, one of the people who has been working on this proposal.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me at the meeting. And I just want to say that I appreciate the comments that were provided. If anyone has any questions about the proposed study, I'm here to answer them, hopefully, and provide clarity. Scott, I think your response of saying that a lot of evaluating the questions and providing answers to them is included in the scope of this initial study is accurate. And the idea of this initial study is to really look at the different alternatives for drinking water infrastructure that are present in the village, looking both at the portions of the village that don't have public drinking water infrastructure now, as well as the portions that are served by both Vernon Academy and by the Warner Center water system. And one of the options that we propose considering is a no action alternative, kind of maintaining status quo. And then similarly, there would be other alternatives that we could investigate and compare costs and conditions resulting from them so that the village could make an informed decision about what they'd like to do. I'll quickly touch on a couple of things. A firefighting only system, or a system designed specifically just for fire protection, there are a couple of limitations for that approach. One is, if you have a system that has a bunch of piping and fire hydrants connected to it, if all it does is provide fire flow, then it's the type of thing that you hope that you never have to use. And it tends to sit idle for long periods of time. And then all of a sudden there's a fire and you try to open up the pipes. And if they haven't been maintained and flushed on the regular, it's unclear about how reliable that sort of a setup would be. At least when you have combined drinking water and fire protection set up, like in town in Bellows Falls or in Brattleboro, there's water moving around the pipes all the time due to routine water use, so that the operators know when they need to go run a hydrant that they'll be able to open it up and get flows and actually be able to fight the fire. So there's a little bit of a technical limitation or potential hurdle that would have to be considered. Not that we can't engineer a solution to it, but that's just one thing to think about that makes it slightly more complicated. There's also a funding piece that goes along with the firefighting only system. We were thinking that the Vermont Drinking Water State Revolving Loan Fund it's a public funding program that's geared specifically for drinking water infrastructure. That program provides a 0% interest loan to do these sorts of planning studies. It's called a planning loan. And there are no payments required for the first 5 years of the loan. If the village then doesn't move forward with an infrastructure project that's funded through the program, they'd have to restart paying the loan. But they get an initial period of time, and even when they start repaying it, it's 0% interest. The limitation with this funding is that under the federal eligibility requirements, because it's all money from EPA that funds the program, they specifically have identified projects geared primarily towards fire protection as not being funding eligible. So if you did want to construct a system and look at a system that would only provide fire protection, and that would be the purpose of it, we would need to find a different funding source other than the state revolving fund. And just want to make that clear. So there's the technical complexity, and then also the funding piece would have to be figured out. But that said, I think initially, if the village really wanted to pursue evaluation of this alternative, and we could define the scope and make sure that we're all on the same page about what the preliminary evaluation would look like, we could certainly do that and evaluate it and provide a full picture of limitations and benefits and a rough estimate of costs associated with this option. Whether we might have to talk about the scope, because I don't know if the revolving loan fund would want to fund evaluation of the alternative if they wouldn't want to fund the alternative to begin with, but we could coordinate with the state and we could figure that piece out. Also, briefly, sorry, I've been talking for a little while, but I did want to answer, I believe it was Ellen, you had questions about the condition of the existing water systems. And Scott, I will say that the Warner water system, I believe it did have detections of coliform bacteria this summer and spring. And one reason why, if you look back on previous years of annual reports, you won't find any documentation about the Warner water system, because I believe the state wasn't aware of it up until very recently. And so they weren't actively regulating it and weren't requiring the routine reporting from it. With Bellows Fall, with Vernon Academy, I believe the deficiency that's been identified with the infrastructure, the one that's documented, is related to a cross connection that may exist between the fire protection pond and the distribution mains. And I could speak more about that if people want, but that's I think I answered the questions. If I missed something, please let me know.
Okay. Is there anybody else who wants to speak? And maybe I should take a minute and I see Carl's hand. Let me finish my thought. Oh, good. We've got a number of people. The proposal was that we discuss the proposal, which has been discussed in town since the last meeting, and vote on going forward with it tonight. Carl, I think I saw your hand, and then Gary's, and then Rick's. So let's start with Carl.
Don't forget me.
Okay, and Matt.
Two comments. First, I would like to support Ellen's suggestion that we look at a fire protection only system as one of the alternatives. There's, I think, a sense that many people, at least in the village, are content with the well system that they have already. They do not see a deficiency in potable water. They do see a potential problem with fire protection. And so I think that looking at fire protection only is a worthwhile part of the study. And second, then I think we need to look pretty widely at funding sources beyond drinking water only funds. In particular, what might be coming up new with federal funds that are being released, which I'm not really conversant with the details, but I hear rumors that there's a lot of money out there somewhere that we should be looking into. And the third, with respect to funding for this engineering study, and I guess this is really directed more towards Amy. We had talked about whether or not ARPA funds would be appropriate for funding a study like this, and particularly if this is a contract between the village and the MSK, and the village is coming up with $45,000. I think we need to know whether or not we can take that out of our ARPA kitty before we decide to move on, because that's a big chunk of money for us to be spending.
So I'm going to answer that one question before I move on to Gary, Rick, and Matt. I have written to Katie Buckley, who is the Vermont League of Cities and Towns ARPA person, and she immediately said, yes, ARPA, but quoted back the clean water provisions. So we run into the same project, the same problem that Pat Smart has outlined. If it's possible that they would give us some difficulty about designing a fire-only system, not the rest of the proposal, but the fire-only system, because it is clean drinking water, clean water funds that are available. And remember, I think Scott pointed this out at the last meeting, that this is not like we are presented with a bill for $45,000. This gets wrapped into a loan or paid off 5 years down the road when we have more things. But simple answer, yes, ARPA funds are available. Carl, we'll give you a follow-up and then we'll move on to Gary.
Yeah, whether it happens a year from now or 5 years from now, borrowing $45,000 is, I think, something we should think very seriously about, considering the debt load that we're already servicing for the wastewater plant, and considering the debt load that we might want to be servicing for the fire station. I think we should be very cautious about saying, well, we won't have to pay anything back for another 5 years and there's no interest. I still think we should be careful about taking on that indebtedness.
Mm-hmm. All right, I think Gary Fox, you were next.
Yeah, I just wanted to put another piece of the puzzle on the table, which is that debt service with a small tax base is a problem, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring up the economic development aspect. And so the most recent comprehensive economic development strategy, the 5-year plan for our region, Southern Vermont zone, includes the importance of rural water and sewer infrastructure in terms of being business friendly and being able to grow business and industry. And I mean, you folks know these pieces better than me. I just remember, a lot of building supply, restaurants, a whole building on Main Street of a strip building with like hair salon and different businesses in there. And so what tonight's discussion is centered on the adequacy for what you have now. And I just would encourage you to think about the ability to attract that business tax base, to bring some of that back. And what being on the 5-year economic development strategy does, in addition to your clean drinking water funds, is it makes projects for water eligible for economic development grants, state and federal, and does also offer the opportunity to grow that portion of the tax base back. I just wanted to put that out there. Thanks.
I think it's Rick next and then Matt. No? Okay.
I was scratching my head.
Okay. So we're over to Matt.
All right, several things. One, I do not support a municipal water system for the village of Saxtons River at all. I haven't heard of short water supplies for regular households. Vermont Academy and the Warner Center are different. So I'm wondering if, I mean, this kind of started with Vermont Academy needing some upgrades to their systems for water. I'm wondering if the village can partner with the Vermont Academy and the Warner Center for upgrades, and in return, we would have adequate water for fire safety at our hydrants. I'm just wondering, funding wise, whether that be an option. We still do need a fire station, and what we should be working on. I'm wondering how many houses that the Warner Center currently serves. I don't think it's that many. And then obviously we need to check the hydrants and see if they work. So that's it for me.
So I think Harold Buckner is here. Do you want to respond, Mr. Buckner, to how many households the Warner Center serves, or perhaps make a comment on the discussion so far? All right, we'll keep moving in that case. Other comments?
So can anyone answer the, can we partner with them?
Yeah, maybe I can. Can you guys hear me?
Do you want to come down here? I didn't offer this to you, Ellen, but so I'm going to put Chris Coda, who is here from the board of Vermont Academy, in my spot.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Initially, Vermont Academy is looking at its long-term feasibility study. And we understand that our system has only a 30,000 gallon storage up on the hill on Rockingham Hill. And as we looked at that, we felt that if there was to, and Vermont Academy has extended its water line down to Main Street here in Saxtons River to allow for a couple fire hydrants for the community to use if needed, and we hope it never needs to be used. However, if we did have a serious fire downtown, then the reserve that we have of 30,000 gallons would in fact deplete itself in a very short time, and then the school has no water to operate, and now we're sending students home. We in our study internally said we should expand our storage area up on the hill so that we could have the appropriate volume so that that scenario that I just mentioned wouldn't happen. We know that it's our own private system that goes for Vermont Academy, but we do share it with the municipality. And so when we started to look at the conversation with Scott Pickup, we said, well, it's a quasi-private public sort of system. It's a hybrid, but and we have an agreement that was signed in 1975 that allowed the town to or the village, excuse me, to utilize the fire hydrants. We don't have to do that, but it just seems like a good neighbor thing that we should be doing that. And so that's where we said we need to work with the village of Saxtons River to see if we can't get some study done, which will benefit both the academy and Saxtons River. The trustees at Vermont Academy have had initial talks with Senator Leahy's office on a number of occasions, and we have been reassured by Senator Leahy's office that if we get the study done, then they think that as he leaves his term in office, he would, Senator Leahy would like to fund, put funds down in southern Vermont and not necessarily just up in Chittenden County. And they thought that this project of facilitating a better, bigger storage system would benefit the area. And that's why we went, VA trustees went to Scott to say, okay, can we work together? Much like you're saying, Matt, that can we work together? And that's where we came from. I think what we did was we went down a big rat hole here by coming up with all these other discussions of trying to tie into a public water system in Bellows Falls or and I agree that, the village of Saxtons River is all on drilled wells. They have their own wells, and that's the way it's probably going to be for the rest of my lifetime here. And I'm not sure that the systems that are in place are not, I think they're adequate for the water usage that individuals need. I do think that the storage of water to help with the fire suppression in the state, in the downtown area is inadequate, and it needs improvement, and we want to somehow do that. And we've had a number of calls with Leahy's office, and they are suggesting that if we can get the study done, then they think that they can get funding through the new act that is going through Congress right now to allow us to do that. And they think that in pretty short terms that it could be completely paid for by the Congress new act of infrastructure. So that's where we're coming from. And I know we're looking at a lot of different questions here, but that's initially really what we wanted to do, was we wanted to expand our storage and at the same time study whether or not the distribution piping is still adequate or not for the school. And we're not talking about building a whole new water system. That wasn't our intent. So I hope that answered your question, Matt.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Mr. Buckner has texted me and said they have 22 users, which I'm assuming is at the Warner Center, and 3 other houses.
Well, yeah, I'm wondering off-site, not on-site. I mean,
And that, Peter Golick here, as Rick just said, there's 3 houses on there that are off-site, plus there's 4 hydrants, I believe that it's serviced by. I know the one on Clark Court serviced by that, because it's never been flushed, and I can tell you, we had an incident that caused us some problems. So I agree with you. I wouldn't be along with the municipal system. I have a 147-foot sewer line right now. And if that thing goes, I can see the expense that I have to play with that, but that's another issue.
All right, thank you. I suspect that the call I didn't take might have been from Mr. Buckner too, so I'm really glad he reached out to Rick with the information. I would like to add one more piece, and that is a reminder that when Main Street Arts did their major renovation, they were doing enough renovation so that they had to deal with the issue of sprinkling a building. And that's turning off the old well in the building they took down, which I think of as the Pizza Paul and Mary building. I know it's had many iterations during its lifetime, but that turned out to be a very complicated water system that involved VTEL across the street and what was then the Golden Egg, a restaurant on the other side. So it's just a reminder. For me, this discussion began with Carl's suggestion that we look seriously at the water infrastructure in the village, that it is complicated and messy and often undefined. I suspect Ellen Howard has a better sense of it than most of us do, but it's Main Street Arts experience was completely out of the blue. I look at the Saxtons River Inn and wonder if at some point it might be a senior housing facility or some sort of apartment building. And it would be very challenging for that building to have the upgrades it would need. Or I think about the large houses in this town and whether they could be converted to a small apartment and a smaller house within the same framework. Again, those things are facilitated by the kind of economic development that public water offers. So I agree with everyone. Paying for that for a village of 500 is a real burden. But I wanted to repeat what Gary said about economic development. We don't have that many opportunities to make economic development happen in a village.
Like you locked up on us.
Question, but I understand that's the reality. So Matt, I'm sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
You froze on me. I couldn't hear some of it.
Can you repeat what you just said? Because
I'll try. So what I said is, I think if we want economic development in the village, so businesses like a new use for the Saxtons River Inn, I know it's not, I assume it's not for sale, but I look at that building and I think of what it could support in terms of housing, or I think of the large houses that are in the village that could support a small apartment, you know, if you redivided the house. All of those things are real challenges for the kind of water system we have now. When you do those kinds of major upgrades, you've got to have access to water. And Main Street Arts had to put in that a very expensive storage system in order to finish out their project. It's the kind of thing that you know, can kill a project if you haven't allowed for it. So it's just a pitch to think of opportunities for the village to look at economic development down the road. I think I ended by saying that I wish this were a town of Rockingham project and not solely a village project, because it's a lot easier to pay for things spread around the town, but I'm sure that would be contentious with the rest of the town. Any other comments? Patrick? And then Matt.
Thanks. I just wanted to add that, and just to emphasize that the initial study is going to look at several
You're breaking
different.
up, Pat. Give it a
I'm
minute.
sorry. Is this better?
Okay.
I just wanted to add and emphasize that the initial study was looking at different alternatives, and we don't have a preferred alternative identified necessarily. One of the alternatives to be considered does include making improvements just to the Vermont Academy water system. And I think the intent of the study is to look at these different alternatives and look at their costs and look at likely outcomes and provide information so that the village can make a decision about what they would like to do and what would work best for all of the users. So thank you.
I think you froze again, just at the end. I heard alternatives for all of the users.
Yep.
Do you remember what you said next?
I think I said thank you. And that was just, the intent of the study is to look at all the different options and let the village make an informed decision about which approach would work best.
Okay. I can't tell whether people are holding still or whether everyone's frozen. Matt, did you have another comment you wanted to make?
I just kind of wanted to rebut your concerns about the inn. And since I moved into the village in 1981, I never heard that they ran out of water. And if they can have events there and people in all their rooms using the bathrooms and showers, I'm not sure why their water source wouldn't handle housing, as you say. And so that's all.
So perhaps I wasn't clear. My thought was if they had to upgrade that facility, putting in a lift, adding accessibility for people with disabilities, then I'm sure they would have to upgrade their water facilities too. I'm not an expert, but
you get kind of getting a little sideways on that.
it looks like Sean. Okay, Sean, you want to be recognized? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just, because it came up at the last meeting as well, where the inn sits with respect to water and this system. And I have no inside information on the inn and its future. I certainly know about the water system. And the inn is fed by a 400-foot well. It is tied in, the sprinkler system is tied into the to the hydrant system. It comes from the Vermont Academy system down Academy Avenue. And that is in fact the agreement that the inn has and the village has with Vermont Academy, that it is not used for domestic water. And I don't know that that makes any difference to any of this, other than it might have been possible in a different day, when you're talking about the Main Street Arts project, Amy, that if there was more supply at the top of the hill, it might have been that the Main Street Arts could have gotten into the same kind of an agreement that the Saxtons River Inn made, 45 years ago. So I'm not trying to do anything except make sure everybody knows where the inn, if it's used as an example, exactly what the circumstances of the inn's water is.
Okay. So, anyone else? Is the board at the point when you want to weigh in on this proposed water study?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
No motion forthcoming? Carl, is that a hand?
Well, I will make a motion if that's what you're looking for. I would move that the village enter into an agreement. Well, no, I'm gonna rescind that. Before I make a motion, I think there's another issue that needs to be brought up. And that's the question of our procurement procedures. If this is going to be a village expenditure, are we okay with our procurement process not having gone out for competitive bid? Matt, I know you raised that last meeting and it wasn't really addressed, but I think we should address it now before we move forward.
I've got a question.
No, I'm done for.
So my recollection is that when Matt asked about how the engineers were chosen, Scott responded that MSK has worked on similar projects and has done work for Rockingham. But Carl is accurate when he says that we have a procurement policy And we would have to put this project out to bid in the terms of our policy. Now, I'm a novice at this, so I'm happy to be trumped by someone explaining why that's not so. Matt, I see your hand.
I'm not going to explain that. I'm just going to reiterate, or ask a question regarding cost. I would think that, and again, I support partnering with Vermont Academy to do the upgrades necessary for them and the hydrants for the village. And I would be in favor of doing the same with the Warner Center. However, I would say that the cost should be split 3 ways. And is that possible with the grant, or is there some type of way of working that out? It would be hard to, I think, to sell it to most of the village, paying for it, a study that upgrades to private owned businesses, although they would be serving the village with the hydrants. So
what is the cost that you're talking about splitting?
don't we have to pay for a study?
Don't we have what?
If we move forward, don't we incur a cost for the study?
The proposed
Yes or no?
study has is $45,000.
Right. Okay. Who's paying for that?
That is based on the assumption that we would need a study in order to apply for any kind of grant funding. And it would need to be a proper engineering study that looks at a bunch of criteria.
Right. So again, I'm saying Vermont Academy and the Warner Center in the village are the ones that are going to benefit from that, and they're the ones that should be paying for it.
It's a great novel idea.
No, that's the way I feel. I mean, I support all 3 of them equally. But I'm not sure why if you're going to sell it to the village taxpayers when we're waiting for a fire station to upgrade, a privately owned entity.
Uh-huh. So of course, Chris Cota has reminded us that the sooner the better, because he's counting on the infrastructure bill and Leahy's office, and that's not going to be around forever. Pat, would you like to comment based on what you know of studies and funding?
So my experience and with the State Revolving Loan Fund, as well as with other grant opportunities that may be available, is it's commonplace and typical for this sort of initial engineering study to be wrapped into the overall project cost when a project moves forward. So if this study is performed and if an option is selected to, hey, let's just improve, add storage capacity and make improvements to the Vermont Academy system and maybe make improvements to the Warner Center system, and there's interest in moving forward with that and funding procured, typically at that point, the cost of the engineering study will be considered part of the overall project and wrapped into that loan or grant agreement. It's hard to say exactly what would happen with the new infrastructure bill or new opportunities that may be on the horizon where the details haven't been worked out yet. I can just speak about how drinking water state revolving loan funds or USDA rural development loan programs have worked in the past. I think based on the way that the state has launched their initiatives for the ARPA funding that they have, they seem to be funneling money from ARPA through their existing loan programs and adding more subsidy. So I would think that these new infrastructure funding pieces would likely be similar to what's been done before, but I don't know that for certain.
That's what Katie Buckley indicated to me. Scott, anything to add from your perspective? I know again that you have experience with engineering studies and paying for them.
Well, I think from the village's standpoint, and I understand Matt's concerns about what's equitable and ultimately
Looks like we're
responsible.
experiencing.
But can you hear me?
Mhm.
But the question, I think, is in terms of timing and where the village wants to position itself in this cycle. I think that you really have to take into consideration how you want to pursue some of these opportunities. I just don't know, on the federal side at least, how long there's going to be this type of money available to make major investments on whatever outcome you decide you want to pursue. And again, I understand there's competing interests. You know, we're looking at fire-related issues with the town, and certainly with Saxtons River, looking at your fire station. You know, we've talked about long-term replacement costs on equipment. A lot of those issues, I think, quite frankly, have to be ironed out, and, you know, between all the entities as we look at how we're going to go forward. But in this case, I think there is some sense of a unique time and a question of how you want to position yourselves to best use the resources that might be available. So that would be my only caution, is that I think, you know, if you decide not to go forward, I'm not sure what the next window would be where you might have an opportunity to do this and maybe have substantial portions of an investment made by, you know, federal funds or state funds. So that would be my only caution.
Matt?
So what's the window? Days, weeks, months?
If
For
we,
Scott? No, I'm talking to Scott. He said window of opportunity. What
Well,
are you talking about?
I don't want to put words in Chris Coda's mouth, but I think he's already worked on some federal opportunities. We're looking at where the stimulus money is coming into the clean water funding cycle. So I would say that within the next fiscal year or two, you're going to see this extraordinary surge of investment. And then after that, I'm really not sure what happens, to be real honest with you.
No, I'm just wondering if it's days or weeks, because I think we could get this resolved. Well,
right. Well, I mean, everything takes time, and, you know, when you start talking about federal monies, you're looking at a different fiscal year. So, you know, there are some issues that you have to look into as it relates to that.
Okay.
I have a question.
okay, question from Ellen.
So how long would the study take? Patrick?
Didn't hear what you said.
Yeah, I think I'm going to ask anyone who can to turn off their video to see if we can get our internet a little bit more stable. Please turn it on when you want to speak, or use the raise hand signal, and I'll try and keep a lookout for it. Ellen, I heard your voice though. Did you want to add something? So you are muted at the moment. Oh, no, you're not.
I am. The study, how soon would it, how long would the study take? How soon would it start? And then what's the time frame on it?
Amy, would you like me to speak to that?
Yes, please, Patrick.
Good question. I would think it would be reasonable to look at the study occurring over a period of 3 to 4 months, calendar time, and that would provide enough time to do an initial evaluation and to have a couple of check-in meetings with the village to say, this is what we're looking at, this is what we're seeing, to collect information, talk to stakeholders, and then we would prepare a draft report that the village would review, and then we would submit it to the state for review as well, after we received comments back from the village.
Okay, and going to Carl's point, this would have to follow a procurement procedure. We'd have to put the study out to bid initially. Matt, did you raise your hand?
I did. So what I'd like to see is some type of agreement between the parties that want in on this. Obviously Vermont Academy, but I think there should be an agreement, a written agreement stating, paying for whatever portion there is. If the Warner Center is in on it, if the Warner Center is in, then it should be split 3 ways and there should be an agreement. And let's move on with it, because those 2 systems obviously need upgrading for the 2 areas, Vermont Academy and the Warner Center, and the fire hydrants for the village. But I don't think we should go it alone just to upgrade other systems.
Okay. Carl?
Yeah, with respect to competitive proposals and the procurement procedure, the procedure does allow us to forego the competitive proposals, quote, in circumstances where it is not practical or appropriate to seek competitive proposals. I'm not a big fan of using outs, but if we're talking about pressures of time, and we're talking about the fact that considerable progress on this was made between the town and MSK engineers before the village became involved, we might want to consider that this was a circumstance where we could forego competitive proposals and look at this particular contract, look at moving forward on this proposal.
Okay. How do the rest of the trustees feel about that? It sounds like Matt may approve it, since he's talking about dividing the proposal 3 ways. That sounds like, Matt, perhaps you accept the idea of the proposal.
Well, did you have a question?
The question is, should we follow Carl's reading of the procurement policy and go with the MSK bid rather than putting the proposal out to bid now?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It's just we need to have agreements in place before we can approve that, or else we're the ones on the hook.
Okay, just wanted your opinion on the first part.
Okay.
Ellen and Rick. Rick, you're in the building, so I can ask you.
I'm fine with it.
You're fine with it. Ellen, how about you?
I am too.
Okay, so it sounds like we're all fine with using MSK. The question is then whether to go with Matt's proposal for splitting the cost 3 ways. So I'm going to turn to Chris, who's here representing Vermont Academy. Is that the kind of proposal you can answer on the fly?
Well, I have to put it through the rest of the trustees, but I can reassure you that we would like to be part of the solution. So I think we can certainly work with you to pay for it.
So there's a willingness on Chris's part to take this to the trustees. Do you want to reach out to Mr. Buckner?
Me?
Yeah, well, I mean, he's texted you tonight.
Actually, I'll talk to him.
Okay. So it sounds like I'm not sure where we are. Go ahead, Pat.
Amy, I would just like to offer that the state revolving loan fund, the planning loan that I talked about that we've discussed, 0% interest, no payments for 5 years. Those are terms that are offered to municipalities, and I would offer that there could be advantages to this project overall if the village did work out its own separate agreements with other entities. I think that would be fine, but I would think that it would make sense from the loan program's perspective if the village were to be the applicant if they wanted to move forward with this project. If they don't want to,
That's fine.
if you want to do other funding, I totally respect that, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that one piece. Thank you.
Sorry, I think we lost connection briefly here.
Mhm.
Carl, go ahead.
Yeah, I am not opposed to sharing the cost of the engineering study out of the money that we have in hand from ARPA. We don't have another use that I'm aware of for it. It's money that's available to us. And
We don't have,
do we have another use for our, what is it, $148,000 worth of ARPA money that's allotted to the village?
no. We have not held public meetings on that, on those funds. And we're getting good advice, I think good advice from Gary Fox that we begin a public process of engagement to talk about the possibilities for using those funds. But at this point, we do not have any other identified project in mind. We have a while to make up our mind how to spend that money. But I think the way I understood what Pat was saying was that using two private entities to pay for the study, Matt's very practical solution would take away the possibility of wrapping this study into clean water funds, the ARPA funds. So I think we have to go one way or the other. If we want to make this a study that is, Chris goes back to Vermont Academy and also talks to Harold Buckner, and we figure out village funds to put in, then it's not an ARPA study. And it does not put us in the same position for the revolving loan funds and other funds. Pat, I see your hand going up. I hope we don't lose you. Go ahead. Did I misstate?
I was just saying, Amy, I think for the purposes of the revolving loan fund, or for using that as a funding mechanism, that the village should be the applicant applying for that program. And I think if the village has separate agreements with other entities related to financing this project, I think that's the village's business. But but the loan program, it has terms and loan conditions that are very favorable, like the 0% interest, 5 years, no repayment, that applies specifically to municipalities. And for that reason, I think the village should be the applicant on the loan, because I think it'll get the best terms and the best situation. That was my comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
I understand better now. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. If we have private agreements, just so that we know that we're not on the hook for anything or using all of our funds available, but applying. I think we did the same thing with, we did something with Main Street Arts. We were the applicant, and all the monies went through the village for their grant. So that's it.
Okay, Carl, is that a hand up?
Yeah, that's a question for you, Amy. Could you
Okay.
could you clarify the process that's involved in accessing the village's ARPA funding? In other words, do we have to hold a series of public meetings before we decide to allocate the money to any specific project, or is that in the hands of the trustees?
It's a great question. I'm not sure I know the answer to it. I think there's a strong suggestion that public engagement is invaluable. But my reading is that we do get to decide how to spend those funds. But I'm still learning my way. I'll ask Scott for an opinion. As our town manager, I'm sure he's been studying these regs even harder. Scott, do you want to comment?
Well, I think that's why at our last joint board meeting, we talked about a public process. I think the ARPA funds, the federal guidelines really want them to be fully vetted with public input. So I think it's always in your best interest to try to put together a public process, even if it's just a public discussion at one of your meetings on a public agenda, and you do some outreach to the community. But I think they really wanted to see some effort to do something specific with those. So at our last meeting, Gary had proposed a pretty extensive public input process that we're going to look into for just prioritizing options with all of our ARPA funds. And again, I don't think you'd be under any obligation to do it. It's not specific, but I think it's in the guidance as strongly recommended. So I would consider that to be something that you would be in your best interest to definitely pursue.
Thank you, Scott. Carl, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, where are we? I guess I'm looking for a motion so we can get a sense of what people want to do tonight. So I'm looking to the trustees. We have the suggestion that the village make its own deals, but that we proceed with the study. I can add to the conversation that I have been trying to update two of our contacts in the fire department, Art Smith and Walt Kiesick. He would very much like to know what the water situation was. And he was particularly interested in the hydrants without committing to where we're going to end up. So do I have a proposal to move forward?
I gotta go. What do we, sorry, I had to leave the room. What's the proposal?
I'm wondering if we're at the moment where we
Oop, lost you.
We still have Rick though.
We still have Rick? Rick, are you there? No, he's not there. Neither one of them. You're frozen. Can't hear you.
No, oh no, Rick is
There we
moving,
go.
but Amy's frozen.
Rick, you there? No. He's breathing, but I can't.
Amy was just looking for a proposal about how we should proceed.
With this particular segment?
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I lost my connection, so I'm going to
Oh,
have
yeah.
someone from Zoom to recap for us.
We have just noted that you've lost your connection.
Okay.
And I was just saying that you had started to ask how we were going to proceed.
So the discussion here in the room has been that we proceed, how did you put it, Rick? Contingent on
So I'll make a motion that we approve moving forward with the grant contingent upon discussion and agreement with other connected parties, being the Warner Center and Vermont Academy. Discussion and agreement. My motion means that we need to have
We have to have agreements with one or both of the other entities.
a written agreement.
Right. Right. So what does that do for us? It doesn't start the process, does it? The motion? I mean, it's accepted. And
well,
then,
it lets us vote tonight, so we know how everybody's feeling.
okay, contingent upon those. Yep. All right. Second.
So Carl, okay, so Carl, I made notes and let's compare what we have. I have that Rick moves to made the motion to move forward on the MSK engineering proposal, contingent on discussion and written agreement with the Warner Center and Vermont Academy.
That's what I have.
Matt and Rick, you both agree on that wording?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're ready for a vote. So
Who seconded that motion?
Matt
Was that
seconded
you?
the motion.
I would like to offer an amendment.
Okay, so we're in discussion now. Carl, what is your amendment?
That we proceed with a public discussion of the use of ARPA funds to pay for all or part of this agreement, following Scott's suggestion that this might be an open discussion at our next board meeting.
So I'm sorry, could you recap?
That we proceed with an open discussion, public discussion at the next board meeting of the use of ARPA funds for all or part of this proposal to gather public input. Is anybody there?
Yes. Sorry.
We're trying to translate what you said, or at least I am.
So you want to make that an amendment? You don't want a simple vote on the proposal? You want to insist on wrapping this into an ARPA public discussion?
Well, okay, I don't want to move forward on a contract without knowing how we're going to pay for it. If you think that that is part of the discussion that we might have with VA and the Warner Center, you know, that's fine. But I just want to know where the money's going to, where the money for whatever share we decide is the village's share. I want to know where that money is going to come from. And if we need to have a public process to rely on ARPA to fund it, then I would like that to be on the table. Yes.
So here's my amended motion then.
Hold on a sec. Hold on a sec. I'm sorry, but I've got Ellen with a hand up and Matt as well. So can you hold that thought, Rick? All right, Ellen, you're next.
I should wait for Rick to read his interpretation of the amended proposal, because I understand what Carl's trying to say, and I am on board with that so far. So Rick, how are you going to propose it?
Matt had his hand up first too.
So Matt, you're next.
I'll listen to your amendment.
Everybody is waiting for you, Rick.
Come on, Rick, let's go. You got other stuff to do.
I'd like to amend my motion to include that there is clarification of where the funding will come from to pay for the contract.
Get a lot of
Using
hit-
ARPA funds.
No, he didn't use ARPA. He said clarification of payment.
Clarification of where the funds are, and an agreement among the trustees where the funds will come from.
No question.
Matt, do you have a question? Is that what you said?
I do have a
Okay.
question. Seem to get hung up on some of the details here. So this ARPA fund, we could pay for the whole thing, right?
I'm sorry, what?
The village could use, okay, so we're not taking out a loan and having to pay it back, correct? Is that correct? We're just using an allotted amount of money to do this study. And then that gets wrapped up into, the cost of it gets wrapped up into the cost of the construction, correct?
Well, that is the suggestion. We
Right,
don't.
but the first part is what I'm looking for clarification on. We have ARPA funds available to us, yes?
We do.
And they exceed $45,000, yes?
Yes.
We do not have to pay them back.
Yes, we have $148,000.
We do not have to pay them back, correct?
Correct.
Okay, then I don't think that motion is necessary, but do what you want.
May I respond to that?
I see Carl's hand. Go ahead, Carl.
My understanding, Matt, is that it's recommended that we have public input on spending of the ARPA funds, maybe not required, but strongly recommended. And that was the point of my amendment to the motion, was that we initiate the process of public discussion of using the ARPA money to pay for all or part of this project.
Right, okay, so my question would be, so you wanted part of it, and until that is done, then nothing will move forward. If we get an agreement from the two other entities that they are on board with the agreement of splitting it 3 ways, you still want to hold it up with public meetings, is that correct? Because we have to warn that and then, right? And then have that?
I think that's the right thing that we have to do or should do because of what's encouraged by the use of those ARPA funds.
Well, then I think that needs to, if that's going to be part of the amendment, then it has to happen ASAP so we can get on the other side of that and not hold up, at the very least, Vermont Academy from upgrading their system.
Yeah, that's the problem. Go ahead, Ellen.
I'm sorry, Gary has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the whole deal with the ARPA funds is that there's 4 years to spend them, and there's another year, over a year, to make a decision on how they're spent. And the purpose of that is to not feel pressured or rushed into how to spend the funds. And I think it feels like there's that urgency the way this is being relayed. And I wanted to point out that both of these programs have plenty of time to move forward without feeling the urgency. So for instance, you have a 5-year loan with 0 interest. You could 2 years from now pay it off with the ARPA funds if it took you that long to, but probably a month to go through an ARPA prioritization. You can move forward with this and at no additional cost pay the clean water revolving loan funds off with ARPA funds whenever you go through your prioritization process. And it avoids being pressured into using funds in a way that you don't want to. And maybe this is how you want to use them, but you have plenty of time to do that at no additional cost. I just wanted to point that out, the intent of the programs.
Okay, thanks, Gary. So I think I'm also a little concerned about rushing the discussion about ARPA funds. I understand the trustees' extremely valid concern about how this study is going to be paid for, but I'm also concerned that we may find ourselves in the month of January dealing with public hearings around 37 Main. So just a reminder that these things take time. It takes time to publicize, to get the information, to get people in. So I'm feeling that I would rather be ready to vote on this study without waiting for the ARPA discussions to play out. That's a personal feeling. And now I'm back to moderating the discussion. So we have a motion and a second on the table. It was suggested that the motion, Rick suggested that he would like to add to the motion the clarification that it be dependent on the clarification of payment and the agreement of the trustees. Does that sound right, Rick?
Yeah. There was no second for it.
There was no second, so unless there's a second, the motion reverts to the original unamended motion.
I second it.
Okay, so now we have an amended motion.
So we have to vote on the amendment.
Okay, Rick is ready to vote on the amendment.
So
Carl?
we can have discussion on it.
I would like, Rick, could you again to make sure I've got it right, restate your amendment? Make sure I've got all of the pieces of it.
Amy read it quite well.
So Rick, the original amendment was to move forward on the MSK engineering proposal contingent on discussion and the written agreement with the Warner Center and Vermont Academy. Rick added the amendment to clarify payment,
Funding sources.
And the agreement of the trustees.
So could you clarify what an agreement of the trustees means?
That we don't disagree. Well, yeah, I mean.
The agreement on the funding sources?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And on the other agreement as well. I mean, if we're going to sign a written agreement, we're going to have to vote on that agreement when it shows up here.
Yeah, I am anticipating a vote.
Okay.
So I think in part what this does is to wait for a real decision till 2 weeks from today. Is there further discussion? I guess I'm still waiting for a second. No, we got a second from Ellen. So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the amendment, which asks for clarification of payment and the agreement of the trustees? Seeing no further discussion, we're ready for the vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment, hold up your hand. You can do it virtually or.
I'll do it in person.
Okay. So we have four, and Carl 4. So it's unanimous in favor of the amendment. Now I think we're ready to vote on the original motion. I'm getting the nod from my useful mentor here. All right, we are now voting on the motion of whether to move forward with the MSK engineering proposal contingent on discussion and written agreement with the Warner Center and Vermont Academy. Is there further discussion? All in favor, hold up your hand, virtually or in person. 4, 5. We have unanimous agreement. All right, we are moving forward, contingent on discussion, and I believe that will take place in 2 weeks. Do you have time to reach out to your trustees, Chris? Okay, and Harold Buckner?
Yeah, he's not on anymore, is he?
I see the person who was, yes, it looks like he's still on.
No, okay.
Carol?
Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to return to the agenda, and thank you everyone who came in and put up with this internet tonight, particularly Scott and Pat and Chris. And Mr. Buckner, I really appreciate your being here. Ellen, Peter, and I apologize for the spotty internet.
They got better after I went out and stopped the bearing the router out Wi-Fi.
Oh, no kidding.
Amy, I think Patrick has a question.
Oh,
Okay.
I was just gonna say, I think I'm going to sign off at this point unless you have any follow-up questions. But I thank you for including me in the discussion.
Hold on
And
a second, Pat. I have Chris here.
I tell them I'd like to have a chat at some point in the next few days.
Okay, Chris, Chris is going to reach out to you, Pat,
terrific.
for a discussion in the next few days. Okay, you're
Perfect.
getting a thumbs up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a nice evening. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Pat. Okay, we're ready to move on to the rest of the regular agenda. We've had a real clearing of the room here. So we are on to item number 4, the Essential Community Facilities Grant application. And we still have Gary, and I think we'll start with Ellen.
Yep.
Ellen, you're on, and I'm gonna put my video off just to see if that helps.
Okay, so this is in conjunction for the fire department. And bear with me for a moment while I get back to. So Gary and I met earlier this week, and then we've been chatting via email since then. And thankfully, Gary knows what he's doing because he's helping me along and guiding me. Okay, so Gary, please jump in for anything that I am missing. All right, so sorry, I'm just grabbing my notes.
Do you want me to give you the ability to screen share?
No, I don't think that that's necessary, at least not
Okay.
yet. Okay, so this is regarding the grant application. And when I asked to have it put onto the agenda, that's when Gary and I had talked about this on Friday. And we got some additional information today regarding it, because I thought that the village could, we weren't 100% sure if the village could apply for it or if the town had to apply, but the end result was that the village can't apply. It has to go through the town. That's correct, Gary, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so let's see, this feasibility study, we have to have it in by December 17th. And it's just the study. And Gary would be the person that would be filling out the application for the town. So it would just have to be presented in front of the town in order to be doing this study, excuse me. So we need to get a request in front of the select board on December 14th to be able to do this feasibility study, which would be a grant. It's a no interest rate, but there would be a 50% matching funds requirement that Gary would have to apply. And Gary, what more? I know I'm probably missing some information. What else more can I contribute?
Well, I guess just maybe the framing. So USDA Community Facilities Program will build a fire station, combination loan and grant, and they require, in one of their requirements is a feasibility report. So when they use taxpayer funds for the facilities, they want to see that the homework has been done and it's clear what the needs are for the facility, the purpose, the purpose and need, the size of the facility, the
We've lost you,
location
Gary.
works.
You still got them.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
And so at any rate, that's why doing the feasibility study first. So whether it's the USDA or we find other funds, certainly one of the best ways to fund projects is a stack of funds. Maybe you end up with a little bit of your ARPA money going towards it, some USDA grants, some USDA loan funds, potential for others. I think the assistance with firefighters grants does not do facilities. Too many fire departments need them. So the feasibility study would show that purpose and need. And because it is part of the whole picture for firefighting of Saxtons River residents or Rockingham residents, there's a whole picture for firefighting that the town, bears some responsibility for. And I think it's fair to ask the town for some match funds. And I believe the feasibility will come out in the $20,000 range. The grant would fund half of it. And so there would be probably $10,000 in matching funds. And I don't know what the, Saxon River Fire Department or trustees wants to put in. But I certainly think we could make a case for half of the match coming from the town. Yeah, I don't know. What do you folks think about that scenario?
What is the time frame, Gary? Can you help me with that?
Yeah,
So
sure. So,
December 14th, I've got that.
yeah, December 14th is the Rockingham Select Board meeting. So we would propose feasibility study, which would look at, your service area, response times, the location of the fire station, making sure that it's where it should be, what size it should be for the equipment, all of those pieces. And so the concept would be presented to the select board on Tuesday night with the request for some match funds. And then the grant would, I would have the grant ready to go then. And as soon as it passed the select board, I would send it in. And there would also need to be a public meeting that's noticed for 10 days. And so that public meeting can take place after the application is in. It has to be before anything is awarded. And it will take a while for the USDA to get through their application. So that wouldn't be a problem. We would want to notice a public meeting for probably, maybe not have it during the holidays, maybe like, the first half of January, have the public meeting. That would be in plenty of time. But get the match money and select board concurrence Tuesday night and get the grant in. Then.
And the feasibility study then is this something we put out to bid?
Once awarded from the USDA, yes.
So Ellen, has your committee met about this?
No, this is just the information that we've gotten thus far. We haven't had a meeting yet.
If we miss this deadline, Gary, what is the next deadline for feasibility studies with the USDA?
So I think in April there's a
Yeah, that's the national one.
Yeah, there's a national one. It's a little more competitive.
Yeah, the December 17th date, that's the state deadline, which, as Gary had explained to me, was competitive. So then if we miss that deadline, it goes to the national pool where everybody's pulling together, and that's even more competitive. but that deadline coincides with tax day, April 15th. So let's see. And the whole overview of this program, just to read it back to you all, is this program provides affordable funding to develop essential community facilities in rural areas. An essential community facility is defined as a facility that provides an essential service to the local community for the orderly development of community in a primarily rural area and does not include private, commercial, or business undertakings. How can the funds be used? It can be used to purchase, construct, and/or improve essential community facilities, purchase equipment, and pay related project expenses. Examples are healthcare facilities, public facilities, courthouses, childcare centers, community centers, public safety services such as fire departments, police stations, etc., fire trucks, public work vehicles, or equipment. And then what kinds are, excuse me, I'm sorry, what kind of funding is available? Low interest direct loans and grants are a combination of above.
Okay. So the match to our fire station seems like it's right on. I'm a little bit concerned. Well, I'm straightforwardly concerned with the shortness of the project and the fact that the committee hasn't met, and I'm wondering how on top of the past plans, you know, the sheaves of drawings and discussions around different sites. I'm just feeling today is December 6th, and you're talking about presenting, writing and presenting a grant for December 14th/17th. Gary, this is not meant as any disparagement on your talents. I know you are a very hardworking grant writer, but Ellen, I put it to you that, you know, the committee hasn't gotten together to look at this stuff. And I'm feeling that you're being very precipitate. I mean, I get it. We've been waiting for a fire department, but you know, you took on this project and you're doing this piece very well, but do you feel like you're really on top of the years of work that have come up to this point?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. And it only came to my attention on Friday about the urgency of it. So, and I do apologize for that. So I understand the concern and it's valid.
Okay. Matt, I see your hand.
Yes, that's very discouraging to hear from you, Amy, and I'm a little disappointed. We're talking about just letting Gary do his job. I'm not sure. We have so many hours into looking at sites and sizes and whatnot, and we need to have this grant so that we can get money to design a fire station that we can afford. And it just needs to be approved and moved on quickly. Gary can handle it. Has nothing to do with whether Ellen and I and Rick have sat in a room for multiple hours, because Rick and I have done that multiple times for many hours over quite a few years. So I think this needs to just move on. I'm
Okay, Rick, do you have anything you want to add? So that sounded like a motion. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't give Carl a chance to respond either. I see no hand from Carl. So that sounded a lot like a motion, Matt, but it could be a motion, Ellen.
Yeah, do we need a motion to move forward on this? Is that what you were asking for? Is that what's needed? Yes or no?
If you want to move forward, yes, you need a motion.
Well, I make a motion that we move forward with this this grant writing.
Matt moves to, go ahead, Matt.
Move forward with the grant writing with regards to funds for moving forward on a fire station.
So I'm going to say to pursue the feasibility study
Well, there you go. Feasibility study. Yep.
Yep. Thank you.
for the fire station.
Mhm.
And Ellen, that says what you wanted it to say?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. In order to proceed, we need a second.
Second.
Rick seconds the motion. And is there any further discussion?
So I have a question. Does the motion imply that that you would match $5,000 to Rockingham's $5,000?
Good point.
That's a good point.
Good point. What do we have? What do we have for monies available? Well, I can't just say, of course, I'm going to say, yes, it does. But I don't think I can do that.
Sarah is not on the call, and I do not have an up-to-date statement from her. We put in matching funds for the municipal planning grant.
Does the fire department have, like a facility fund?
Well, we'd have to look into, it wouldn't be, I don't know, the general fund for the fire department. There had been money set aside, and I don't know what that number might be at. We
I can follow up on this.
Yeah. Do we want to have it contingent upon monies being available, or?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Sure. Contingent, so I'm looking at the original motion. Matt moved to pursue the feasibility study for the fire station. And what if we said contingent on the availability of $5,000 match from the town, match from the village of Saxtons River?
Yeah, I guess I have, being that timing is an issue, how are we gonna pull that off?
Well, I would suggest a very brief special meeting.
So we need to know what monies are available from Sarah so that we can approve them.
This says contingent on. Then we reach out to Sarah and have a short meeting that at least 3 of us need to attend.
Yeah, that should happen this week if we're gonna, Gary obviously can get all the paperwork, but if we're gonna be in a position to offer that, we've got to have that taken care of prior to going to that meeting.
So I should go ahead, Rick.
I believe there is a fund for this, isn't there? Isn't there a line item in?
Well, there has been. We used, and I don't have it in front of me. Again, we used the bulk of it or all of it at one point to design our Taj Mahal fire station. But I think every year we've put money in there. I just don't know what that number is.
I know Celia Bohannon has done a one-woman fundraising job too, and $5,000 is not a lot of money. I am still very concerned about the timeline. This seems rushed to me, but that's one person's opinion.
I understand. I respect that, Amy. I understand that. It is.
It's been a lot put into this. The only rush is the timing to get the grant, and Gary can pull that off. So. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. And I apologize. It's my being a newbie and not knowing when there's enough information to coordinate a meeting. So I take responsibility for that.
It's just the timing. I come from a background where you want to build in plenty of time because a good grant application takes a lot of preparation, and that's just the nature of the beast. So no, you don't get to predict when those deadlines come. That's why I explored the other ones. I assume if we miss December and we miss April, then we're probably waiting till the following year for USDA applications. Is that true, Gary?
Yes.
Yeah.
Move to vote.
Is everyone talked out? Are we ready for a vote?
Do we clarify the funding part?
So yes, I suggested that the original motion be contingent on the availability of $5,000 match for the Village of Saxtons River. Are you comfortable with that, Matt, as part of your motion?
Sure.
The friendly amendment, so we don't have to vote on?
Yeah. Ellen, how do you feel about that as a friendly amendment?
I like that friendly amendment.
Okay, so I think we have agreement there. Are we ready for a vote? Carl, do you need to have the motion read back?
The motion is to move forward with a grant for a feasibility study contingent on the village having $5,000 to make a match.
Okay. So are we ready for the vote?
Mhm.
Okay, all those in favor signify by raising your hand. And it's 4-1 with Amy Howlett, the stinker who won't vote. So 4-1
And I'd like to
in-
thank, I would like
4-1
to
in
thank Gary.
favor.
You
So the
voted no,
motion
or
passes.
you abstained?
I voted no.
No. Okay.
No reason to abstain. Okay, so the motion passes, and I will email you for a special meeting. Anybody object to really early in the morning, say 8 o'clock on Wednesday?
Early, that's not early.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
not early.
Yeah, that works.
5:30.
8 a.m. on Wednesday, tentatively?
5:30 would be fine. 6.
I won't be available at 8.
How about 7 p.m., 7 a.m.?
No, I've got chores that keep me busy from the time I get up until about 9.
Okay, I'll be in touch. 7 a.m. work for you, Ellen?
It does.
You're not in the car then? Rick, it's okay with you?
I'm in the car, but I can do it from the car.
Okay, all right. And Matt, you said you were available too.
Mhm.
I will get that agenda out so that that has to be posted. Okay, we are moving on to number 5, the Windham County Sheriff. I'm not sure. I think that's
I think
just an
Gary-
artifact.
I think so too.
Gary,
I think-
thank you so much for
Thanks,
hanging
Gary.
in there.
Thanks,
What a
Gary. You've
long
been a huge
meeting.
help for me. Thank you. Can I just interject one thing? So should I get in touch with Sarah and Art about what monies are available?
Just Sarah.
Just Sarah, okay.
And I have a phone number. I typically call her the day after the meeting to drop
Okay.
off warrants. So why don't you leave that in my hands?
You sure? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Quite a
Thank you.
wind event.
Yeah, I know.
Huh?
It's pretty
Yeah.
darn windy up here on the hill.
Yeah. You might want to be wrapping this one up.
Okay. Windham County Sheriff, Rick, you have nothing, right? No, I'm going to cross that off. I apologize. I think that's an artifact from the last meeting. Committee reports and updates. Anything new on the fire station?
Yeah, we're doing a feasibility study.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Wastewater treatment plant?
Still makes noise.
I checked with Josh Kemp today, and Rob Wheeler is away this week on vacation. Josh believes that there is no appointment yet for installing the pipe insulation.
Mhm.
But Rob would know better than Josh, so that's where we are on that. And he also said we have really clean effluent, so that was good.
I've heard that.
All right, I believe we are on to item 7, minutes for approval from November 15th. Do I hear a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes of November 15th.
Matt has made a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Carl has seconded. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from November 15th. Is there any discussion? All in favor, show of hands? Carl, are you voting on that motion?
Yep, I just have
Okay.
to find.
It passes unanimously. Warrants and bills for approval. Hold on, let me share my screen. So it's a little stiff, and it's a little long. Let me point out some highlights. We are paying $1,000 for protective clothing down on item 20. That's, you know, can't think of the name, Kevlar, and that stuff is expensive and necessary. R&R Communications 2-pagers at $465 a piece, so that's $930. We were served with an old series of bills from Aquionics, so these have been hanging around for a bit, 2 in June and 1 in August. The company finally emailed Sarah, and I checked with Rob Wheeler at that point, and he said they were all valid expenses. One of those is almost $4,000. And the other big item is $2,300 for our property and casualty insurance. This covers all kinds of things. I can send you the full description if you want. This is our ongoing coverage for all things protecting our village. So in my mind, that is a routine and essential payment. Are there questions on any of these items? I have the bills with me. Oh, and the other one I wanted to point out is number 13, Town of Rockingham, clean the sewer lines, NA Manosh. That's a bill for $2,200.
So our total is 25,000?
$25,425.87.
I make a motion.
Okay.
that we approve the warrant, $25,425.87.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Rick seconds the motion. Are there any other questions or discussion on the warrant? Okay, it's been moved and second to pass the warrant in the amount of $25,425.87. If you hold up your hand to vote, all in favor? And that's all 5 of us, so it's unanimous. Okay, other business. I have a CODA and CODA service policy that I've been sitting on. I will send that out to you for comment at the next board meeting. I don't know what the practice of this board is regarding CODA and CODA, and I suppose it might make sense to check with the wastewater treatment plant and with the fire department. I've had the impression that we've had CODA and CODA for a while. Carl and Matt, do you want to comment? Do you typically go out to bid on these contracts?
No, I don't think we have. I think we just stayed with CODA and CODA, although I don't believe we've ever purchased this. It's kind of an insurance policy. It doesn't.
This is a service policy. This talks about their costs. I will send it to you.
Okay.
So it sounds like we'll have a brief discussion about it at the next meeting. But Carl, unless you want to contradict, in the past, you've just gone with CODA and CODA as far as you know?
As far as I know, we bought our services from CODA and CODA for as long as I've known anything about it.
Yep.
So I will send the scan to everyone and we will discuss at the December 20th meeting. I wondered whether you wanted to weigh in informally on the joint board meeting. I know, did everyone attend that meeting? Well, I know we had a quorum there. So I'm talking about the joint board meeting on the 30th with Rockingham and the Village of Bellows Falls. Comments?
Is this another business?
This is in other business because I didn't put it on the agenda.
I didn't enjoy it.
Did you have feelings about, do you want to change something? Do you want to stop going? What's your
No,
thought?
I think we I mean, we haven't had a presence there, but being there and being kind of set off in the corner and shushed, in my opinion, was, you know, a little.
You'd like to go again, but there should be changes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we're gonna go, there should be changes, and I think that there's enough, so one thing that Mr. Golick and I had a brief chat about, was, you know, that if Saxon River is gonna go, then maybe they should just hold it to things that have an impact on the village of Saxon's River, and pretty much everything they talked about that night had some sort of impact on the village of Saxon's River. You know, we're residents of the town and the community, and, you know, it's just, so I don't know, apparently years ago, and I don't know if it was before your time or not, Matt, that there used to be tri-board meetings. You know, and
I went to one, and they don't typically like us at the tri-board meetings. They don't.
Yeah, I don't know why. That was, you know, it felt that way at this meeting. That's what I didn't like about it. It's like, well,
Yeah, well, they're not used to it, and right, we pay a big tax to the town of Rockingham. We should be able to sit before them and discuss what's in the village, just like Bellows Falls does in their village.
yeah, you know, like Peter said to me, like, oh, we'll stick to roads, you know, maybe if we're gonna have a discussion about roads and sidewalks. I was like, well, everything else, you know, they talked about a mask ordinance that night that, you know, would impact the village of Saxon's River. There was, you know, it felt to me like most everything that they talked about would somehow, you know, if the town of Rockingham is going to enact a mask ordinance, then that has an impact on Saxon's River, right?
Sure. And a selling cannabis.
Selling cannabis, you know, all of that's pretty much everything there could have had an impact on Saxon's River. So if they, you know, and if the cannabis thing goes through, you know, the little red shop across from the market very well can become a cannabis retailer. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I, you know, have mixed feelings about such things, but in our roles as trustees for the village of Saxon's River, if we're gonna, it seems like having a seat at that table that only meets quarterly anyway, so it's not like it's a monthly or bi-weekly thing. I think I don't see why we wouldn't want a seat at that table.
Okay. Carl, your reactions?
My reaction was, if we were there, we ought to be sitting out at the table with the village of Bellows Falls and the select board.
Yeah, I agree.
That's the way it was. I think there was 2 meetings that we went to, and they put it in a U shape, and we had our name tags in front of us, and we're part of it. But they're not used to that. So
yeah, and I was saddened by the fact that our names weren't on the agenda and we weren't sent the packets ahead. So there's work to be done. I'll talk to a couple people and we'll pursue this. I believe the next one is in March. So I'll see if I can do better before we get there. We won't really consider it until then. Ellen, I'm sorry, I cut you off. Your reactions, because you were there too, handing me papers, giving me a pen, very valuable.
Yeah, well, I would have liked to have had a seat at the table. I mean, I didn't really put too much thought into it in terms of, you know, feeling dejected or, you know, whatever. But I would like to see us, if we're going to attend these meetings, to be at the table, to be a part and be recognized as a formal entity.
Yep.
Well, the part that really annoyed me and kind of pissed me off was when they were talking about this fire commission and all the work they're doing, and I raised my hand to bring up the fact that we've been trying to build a fire commission for 15 years, and several of the other board members pointed out that I had my hand raised, and Deb Wright was like, "Board members speak first," and I was like,
yeah, need some education there. Okay, I will take that under advisement. Let's see if there is anything else? Anything else under other business? Okay, any executive session needed?
Maybe that.
Motion to adjourn.
Back TV, edit that out.
I want items for the next meeting, December 20th. Well, get them to me if you think of anything. All right, I think we are ready for that motion, Matt.
Okay, so made.
Okay, a second? Move to
Second.
adjourn? Ellen, all in favor? Great. Thank you very much.